To call to order the Curriculum and Student Development Committee of the Madison Board of Education. Committee is comprised of Mary Ann Collins on my right, and Kathy Miller, who is not here this evening, and I'm Stephen Penn. And as usual, we turn the meeting over to our Assistant Superintendent, Gail Dowling-Hench, to introduce the items on our agenda. And so we have fun tonight.
Well, thank you so much. We have a bit of everything tonight. So we're going to start out with a little bit of work from the math department, then we're going to switch over to the art department. Then we're going to talk about curriculum in general. So thanks so much for having us again tonight. I think you've met both of our presenters before, Christine Justice, who's coordinator of the math department, Bill Summer, who's coordinator of the art department. So welcome back, both of you, and thanks for your time. Absolutely. We're going to start with Christine. Christine has presented before, and you just had a program update on the program of studies and some of the shifts going on in the math department and the program of studies. So Christine's going to bring us up to date on two pieces, work that they've been doing pretty extensively, looking at a textbook adoption for geometry. And then we're going to swing back to Algebra 1 and an update on how that's going in Algebra 1 in the new model. So Christine, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. So as Gail mentioned, we did make our switch in the Algebra 1 to consolidating our level 2 and our level 3. And we are now moving towards that change happening next year in the geometry. And that highlighted our need to look at a redesign of our current curriculum, as the level 2 and level 3 didn't quite align, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing something that would meet the needs of all of the students, as well as take into account some of the more recent changes that have occurred post-COVID from the state, from the college perspective, from SATs, around what are the key essential concepts of geometry. So as Gail mentioned, this has been an extensive process that started a year ago for us. When I had Justin as the math coach, him and I were able to work together, and we went through and we did a deep dive into the standards for the SAT. When they did the redesign, they've changed exactly what they're looking for in terms of the geometry. I've attended several meetings with a group that was organized by the director at the in Middletown High School, and she's the director for I think it's 6 to 12 there. We had representatives from several different high schools come together and talk about what we're all sort of doing for curriculum. She gathered the input from the colleges in terms of what their perspectives were, what should be the highlighted topics that we cover through high school, and geometry was one of the focuses there. And then we looked at our current programming and the state standards. They've come out with the priorities. What should we be emphasizing more than others? So we started there so that we would know that when we went to a textbook, we would be identifying what we wanted the textbook to include. And we also brought in the changes that we've been making to our instruction using the IM, having students really collaborate, problem solve together, and all of those features. So we attempted to look at 8 different program options. And we had a committee of teachers who went through the process of looking at all of those. We had IM in there, Open Up Resources, Pearson, HMH, and several others as well. IM is obviously illustrative math is what we're using for the current Algebra 1 and lower grades. However, we did not feel that that was the program that we wanted to continue with. We've heard from other high schools that are attempted it through Algebra 2, that it's really not matching and aligning with what the progression would be for us to help students be most successful. So we did a pivot. And so after that extensive research, we had landed on 2 very similar type. One of them is the one we've chosen here. It's considered a Big Ideas program. It's from our Geometry Concepts and Connections. The other one that was a real close second was the HMH. However, the one key difference between the 2 of those is that anyone who went onto the online resources, when the special ed teachers did, when some students did, when our math department did, it was This website is very difficult for us to navigate. So that was really what took that one out of the list compared to this one. But what we really like is that it covered all the essential topics and standards that we wanted to obtain. It allows us some flexibility of the order in which we complete those units. So we're not tied to the direction that the book does. If we think we've already kind of established that if we went with this, how we would rearrange the units to make it align with our programming. There is the application aspect, but there's also opportunity for practice, which is a lot of what IM lacks, is that opportunity for repetitive practice. This has that, and it has a fabulous online platform for extra videos, for some translation of language, for students to explore some of the elements that could get their access to career. This is actually a pamphlet from them in terms of how their entire programming goes. So it kind of just does a quick highlight of some of those elements. And students have access to an e-textbook. They will also have a textbook that we're going to leave in the classroom so that they can have access in the room for using the textbook. They'll have access at home for an e-textbook, extra homework practice, those videos. There's a ton of online resources for the teacher to incorporate that'll differentiate that instruction for students to have. And we felt that this was the most appropriate and best choice for us to use moving forward.
Thank you, Christine. And I know also students took a look at it. Special education, regular education.
They
correct?
did, yes, there was a group, special education, I'll just highlight some of their thoughts. They felt that it was super user-friendly, that there was opportunity for accommodations and modifications. There's a flashcards included, especially with geometry, that's super important with all the definitions and postulates. And they really liked that career to call it the connection to careers that the book offers as an opportunity. There are some PBAs built right into each unit, which also are really helpful for us to be able to look at making it applicable to students. So it has all of the elements that we would want to embed into the curriculum work that we're going to do.
So textbook adoption doesn't come that often. We are pretty few and far between with them. Generally speaking, AP texts are very slim in terms of the amount or the variety that you can select. It's very much dictated by College Board. This is like one of the areas that we do look at quite a few options because we are not narrowed by College Board. So that's why it took well over a year. I mean, I think we've been talking about this well over a year to narrow it down to this final selection. There is, you know, of course, kind of a duration that you expect to have a textbook in play for. This one, we bought a 6-year online package, which guarantees us at least 6 years of the online resources. Chemistry has a similar profile, and most textbooks are doing that, where they have a parallel product for online. And then generally speaking, when that parallel product is not published anymore, that online stuff, then you have to go back and re-adopt a textbook. So just to give you a time frame as to how long we're using it, that's about the right time. So we bought as many years electronically as we could.
And the previous book that is currently being used in the level 2 class is actually copyrighted from 1991. So it's a very, very old book with very limited resources. There's no online resources for students. So we think that this going to a textbook adoption along with changing the curriculum was the best approach so that we can provide students with more than we've been able to in the past.
As you know, all of our kids take geometry. So benefits all kids.
There's a few things I noticed about it. First of all, for a geography book, I noticed that the shape is rectangular, which is good, reinforces geometry. But more seriously, I love that there are SEL connection highlights and English English language learner sidebars, data talk, and the career stuff. I mean, this is really a book that seems to be modeled on the type of stuff we're trying to feature as a district, and you know, all within math, which is great. So I like it.
And for the price, so that's $156 for the 6 year.
Yeah, and we'll have 120 books and 120 digital copies, which I thought was
That's
very
pretty
reasonable. I had originally considered digital with just a handful of textbooks, and it came out to the same price, and I was like, well, that financially doesn't make sense.
That's yeah, like usually we were talking about the shipping is quite expensive, but about 25,000 for the purchase.
For the purchase, yeah.
So usually we get about one textbook a year.
Yeah, and that's for 6 years.
Help me understand how this balances with what we usually see, because we don't usually see leading textbook presentations,
Oh,
but
for curriculum.
curriculum development by department supported by materials. So
Yeah.
this is feeling more like,
Yes. So I think the exception to that approach has always been math, where we actually look deeply at materials and sequence. However, just as Christine said, the math department through curriculum writing, we realize there is a natural progression that makes sense to kids that sometimes it's not mirrored in a textbook. And then we switch around that progression. This one doesn't link one content area to the next, so we can have that latitude, which we will use. So the curriculum writing will commence after they have the textbooks. But they have more latitude too than just what's in this textbook, because we always enhance and enrich. And also the team has been pretty extensively trained in illustrative math, which and vertical use of boards. So that going forth would kind of create more methodology use too than beyond the textbooks.
Yes, and I would add that the amount of prep work we did in reviewing what we wanted the textbook to include kind of was a basis of our curriculum work without writing anything formalized, so that we could just find the book that would align. Given that we are going to be implementing the geometry next year, and we want to make sure, so as Gail said, the curriculum writing will begin as soon as if this gets approved, or regardless, because we do need to write new units. So the book coming afterwards might not have been timely in that process, so we're kind of trying to do them simultaneously to be best prepared for the start of next year.
But like with self-standing units, you can front load some of the stuff that's more likely to be on the standardized tests, for example.
Yeah, I think they're pretty well versed now in the new SAT, although, you know, I keep hearing around the state how different the math one is, and we kind of went through it, but we did quite well, so I think the team knows what to expect in that regard. Yeah, they always make sure that they look at that content, but we are in a trimester schedule too, which makes it a little bit more challenging as well. So, you know, I think that, you know, math is an area that always relies on a textbook or text materials to some degree, where most of the other content areas are more divergent in what they pull in.
I mean, that's what I suspected. I mean, the other is, you know, and I heard what you said in terms of really exploring deeply and plumbing what the essential concepts are. You know, in the nature of math and the sequence of it, there are a lot of essential concepts.
There are,
So
there's a lot to cover, right? Yeah.
Right, so, you know, I can see the value, you know, of having a textbook. I just always watch for, you know, the driving energy of this district is teacher generated curriculum development and ownership. And, you know, I always watch for, you know, what is, we see in many other places, a traditional shift, which is the textbook guides it and the teacher just follows it.
But math is
Appreciate that.
a little bit different in that sense.
Especially with geometry, with the amount of need for students to see the visuals of diagrams and such, there really isn't any programming out there that would give us those resources that isn't somewhere sort of static when it comes to a textbook. We've also highlighted the need to continue to support the algebra work through geometry. So we wanted to make sure that there was a geometry book that had enough of that in there, so that the elements we were looking for was embedded in that approach.
And of course, I'm in the other area that we value and, I hear what you're saying, that it is in here is the whole business of application, particularly in geometry, that students get to use it.
Yes. And there's definitely more of that and less of the proof base, which is also the direction that we're planning to go when we write the curriculum, because colleges are saying that 2-column proofs isn't what they're looking for, so it's not supporting them. And also the application is what is really gonna drive, 21st century skills and profile of a graduate more so than the proofwriting elements.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So she's not off the hook yet.
I'm not off the hook,
She's
now
not off
it's
the
algebra.
hook.
Now to 2.
Now, yeah, we're gonna shift over. So Algebra 1, this is our first year of not having the level 3 Algebra 1. So I thought it'd be great timing since Christine was here to give us an update on how that's going
Yeah.
and how the students are responding. So I'm gonna turn this off and have
Perfect.
Christine talk about Algebra 1 for us.
Excellent. So we actually just met yesterday with TJ and the Algebra 1 team to kind of do a debrief after trimester 1. From the very beginning, I've heard really positive remarks from the teachers. I'm actually currently also co-teaching a section, so I get to be in it right now myself. But the students are finding really great success using the model that we've put into place. So our Algebra 1 courses are currently all co-taught with 2 teachers, typically a special ed teacher and a math teacher. We have the one that has 2 math teachers in it, just providing that additional support. And then we've had the opportunity of working with Sonia Kunkel as well to provide that co-teaching model support. So the students, when I've been in there to observe, are working collaboratively. Sometimes the teachers are able to do heterogeneous groupings. Sometimes they're intentionally using the results of some cool downs to create groupings the following day to provide direct support. We're using, oh, sorry.
Heterogeneous grouping means grouping of all different abilities. Homogeneous is working on the same thing.
In addition to that, we've been doing some pre-teaching work with the students, trying to use any data, some pre-assessment data, any previous data that we have about the students to really make sure that we're supporting them. As the year progresses, Algebra 1 material becomes a little bit more challenging, so we'll continue to focus on those supports. But the teachers highlighted the benefit of having that co-teaching model. We also have the Algebra Lab this year that students have been either assigned to or chosen to move into to provide them that additional free support to make sure that they have the foundational skills necessary to launch into the activity. It could be support around being able to read what the problems are asking, since IM does have some reading components to it, or the skills that they would have gathered or should have gathered in the middle school or prior to be ready to access the grade level curriculum. So we're really finding success there. We're using our PLC time to be able to collaborate as our team and looking to figure out how to even add more of that time in as needed to be able to continue to decide and just determine what we can do to best support the students. But the remarks have all been about positive responses. Students are being able to engage with each other. There's not any level of concern around people having any challenges behaviorally. Students who are struggling are working. One teacher actually reported that a student, based on how they came into the classroom, probably would have been identified as a level 3 student just based on their history. And within the first few weeks, got the supports they needed through the Algebra Lab and just being in the classroom, and is now oftentimes in their highest group. And so therefore, a student who would have been in the level 3 for the whole year showed that they just needed a little bit extra and now are often at the top. So that to me is a huge win for the way in which that we're supporting that programming.
And and the book, use the algebra book
So
written by.
we don't use that. So what we did is we wanted to continue with what the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade was using for illustrative math. So we are using illustrative math with other supports built in. So just like that program itself won't be an end all be all, there's a lot of value of the illustrative math in terms of the problem solving, getting students to collaborate and to think. There are elements that it's a little bit lacking in, and we put in those supports. So Sonia, we were talking with Sonia about how there's not a lot of differentiation provided within the tools of IM. And so we're embedding those, finding ways to add in some free teaching or deviate between who might do 2 of the IM activities and one group might do something else and then one of the activities, to ensure that we're sort of reaching that same end result for all students of whatever the standard is that we want to reach.
So Sonia Kunkel is a consultant. So she's part of that whole philosophy of professional development, sitting side by side with curriculum work, and supporting teacher repertoire. And this is a really good example of where it really works together pretty well. Because we're asking a shift not only in teaching, but how you approach learners and how you meet the needs of all learners. So it's really a heavy lift. So it's something that it's something we've been eyeing collectively for a long time as a goal. So it's really coming together.
And is the math coach involved in?
So that's something that's kind of an update. So we had a math coach in the beginning of the year who actually left for another position. And when our title funds were cut, we didn't replace the coach because we lost the title funds. So, but we added Sonia Kunkel in, more time for her. So we boosted it back that way for this year. So.
And it's 9th grade.
Mostly ninth graders, yep.
Is there a budget response to that, losing that one, like, do we still have the positions funded in the next proposed budget?
We have proposed not to bring that back, but we've built in, as Gail shared, with some outside consultants and work and feel we've got it mostly covered. Would you say that the grades that students are earning is similar or better than previous years?
Yeah, so TJ did a dive into it and identified that all students were successful, minus unfortunately the few that aren't coming to school, that if we don't reach them, we can't help them as much. But yes, there has not been a drop off in students being less successful in this approach than they were in the previous. And I think that there's gain for many of them because if they were in a level 3, they're all surrounded by like peers who may have a hard time getting motivated and started, maybe feeling defeated about math to begin with. This model provides them with the opportunity to work with other students that can maybe bring a different layer of understanding to help them to recognize. And I would say that if we had done that, I think without the additional supports that we've put into place, it would be a huge undertaking, because we do have students who are having some learning gaps between their experience in prior years. And so especially having the algebra lab, our goal is to really look at how we can even improve upon that model to have more students in there, a better pathway to have students access that as they need to, so that we can ensure that even more students continue to have the supports they need so that they are really as close to on grade level as quickly as possible.
Yes, and thank you. I'm not surprised. I knew you would do this, but to take an Algebra 1 class yourself, it allows you then as a coordinator to speak to all the other teachers that are doing that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So, one of the reasons that we dropped the level 3 and went to this model was to prevent the pigeonholing of students into a low morale math tailspin, where through their whole educational career at Daniel Hand, they're gonna feel like, oh, I'm in the dumb class, or I can't do math or whatever. I'm bought into that, I like that, but there have to be some cases where challenging some of the students that would have been drafted lower, right, or assigned to a level 3 class, will have difficulty overcoming an existing feeling of low morale or low confidence in their math abilities. And I know you're saying that you're doing things to address that, but like, how is that addressed to a student who clearly just does not feel like they can do it? Like, is there an example you can give? Or just something you can, you know, like, how does the program work through that?
I think, so one of the instructional strategies that we use follows from the building thinking classroom model of a lot of random grouping, right? And one of the main topics of that book and research showed that if you put students into groups and you assign them a role or you pair them up, they kind of feel like, oh, I'm with that person because I don't know what I'm doing and they're there to help me, right? By doing the random grouping, and they see it because the random grouping is done in front of them, they don't have that sense of who I am. And so I think that that's one element that sort of takes away that filter of I'm struggling. When you walk into a room, even when the teachers have strategically placed the students, so they might have put their names around the room, it is not evident unless you're really seeking it out who's who, because the special ed teacher is working with this group or the regular ed teacher is working and they mix back and forth. So we think the dynamics within the classroom help to address that element in the classroom. I think continuing to provide the students the algebra lab to get them the confidence, right? I think that that's where they struggle, is when they're outside of the room and they're finding challenge. Our interventionist turned teacher who's doing this lab was a veteran teacher who spends a lot of time trying to sort of help coach up that positivity.
So it's almost a public approach to what used to be private tutoring for math.
Yes. Yeah, so we do it, so
Right.
they get a chance, the groups that they're in are relatively, they're 30 minutes, they meet every day, so they're getting that really structured additional support. And Michelle has noted that she has found significant gains that they've made with her, and that she feels that if they didn't have that, they'd be swallowed up in the algebra class. And I think that's where what you're talking about would be identified, that they would feel that sense of loss.
And then when they step back into the classroom in a group, they feel like, they feel comfortable, like, oh, I've already learned this, or
Yes.
that's good.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting.
This really isn't a conversation about algebra. You know, I mean, it's much more a conversation about changing practice and dynamic and approaching the subject differently with, you know, students that are vulnerable,
Mhm.
you know. I mean, there's a couple things in what you've said that really catch my attention. One, the whole business of the need and support and the requirement of, you know, PLCs among the team to continually look at what's working, what isn't working, and what needs to be adjusted. The other is your remarks about mobility of certain students that, you know, otherwise would have been identified and kind of locked into a artificial structure of this is where your, you know, your competencies lie, and they would stay there and they can move through. You know, I will say, because it's part of my own experience, there are models that have been wildly successful at this. That are worth investigating. The kids with significant learning gaps that have mastered and done very well in algebra with a very different dynamic, you know. And I'd be happy to talk to you about that at some point, because I have had some deep experience with it. But in any event, you know, I absolutely, and you know, I think the, you know, committee absolutely on many levels supports this initial decision to get rid of the level 3, and then, you know, in an informed way, looking at, so what does that mean? And how do we support this? And the co-teaching model clearly identifies, you know, these are kids that need additional support. And that requires manpower and time.
Yep.
So, you know,
And I think we've done a really good job also working vertically, really identifying through data and other observations around how do we make this go back all the way to the elementary school so that we can identify where some of those learning gaps are forming more and we can maybe start to plug them sooner. And so I think we've done a lot of that to be able to identify the supports that we can continue to provide.
So both math and ELA have very strong vertical teams of coordinators and coaches. They meet on a regular basis. We're meeting this Friday on a vertical team. We go through professional development articles. We go through different ways to look at data, different approaches, common practices. And then we also do instructional rounds vertically. So Christine's able to get out of the high school and go all the way down to the elementary school. And we look at common practices, and then we take notes and go around to classrooms. Then we gather together and see what we saw. We do that at every level of the district. We do it in ELA and math. It's been fun, really fun. And it does generate a lot of conversation.
Well, it's very, very exciting, you know.
It's been very nice to have Christine on board. How many years is it now? 4? Is it your 4th?
Third year in this role, 4
Third year.
years in the district.
And 4 years in the district, so in a very short amount of time. We're very happy to have her.
Fantastic.
I mean,
Thank you.
that's a visceral commitment to try and not have kids fail, you know, and that's what we're about.
Yeah.
So,
Sure is.
I would have been, needed a lot of that.
So many times geometry goes hands in hand with art. So
Yeah.
how was that?
Super.
Smooth, like transition?
Good transition.
Smooth transition.
All right, so I will update you briefly, just, I did bring a couple of photographs here, just because you don't have as much artwork up or any artwork up in here anymore. And this is from our commercial photography class. One of the bigger things that I was trying to do is, so it obviously, the same idea of getting to all students is that like the commercial photography class is much more not just about the art, but it's also about doing something that's practical, that they can see different careers and things that they can work with. So, you know, we do everything from portraiture into, you know, our big thing is food photography. And then I did something a little bit different this year because I think Mr. Becker, I used to always put down my donut photos that we do and all these other great things. And he's looking at them just kind of cringing because he does all the food stuff. So this year I had them sell a healthy living. So at least this way I can put it down there and he can be happier with the result and still, you know, still met the needs of the assignment. But a couple of changes or updates. So let's see, when I came here, we did our art show at Scranton Library, but it was always a little bit too small. We were kind of stuffed into the basement, and we just felt like it was better to bring them to the school, show them what we do at the high school, so everybody can see that. However, now with the library changing and really wanted to kind of include the community and really kind of enforce that with our students and the community, we partnered again with the library. Kari, who I worked with years ago, is still there. That we're going to do our art show back at the library again. Claire was starting to work on it because she started, we'll have a poster with it, and she actually found an old image of the original library that we were going to do. So it's just one of her pieces that we'll have this. You'll see this around big posters that, and the art show will be March 18th. A little bit different, a little bit earlier, but we get to have it up for a full month there. So everybody will be able to, we're gonna use, I think, both of the community rooms. We have hundreds of frames that Gail was able to get us, so we're gonna be putting a lot of artwork up this year, more than we've had at the library, back at the high school. So that's kind of a nice change. To add to it, one of the things that I loved about having it at the high school was that we actually would bring in our high school students to demonstrate on the wheel, doing all different types of things, the drawing, painting and everything. And we're kind of losing that by bringing it back to the library. So we are planning on setting up something where most likely in April, where we're going to do an art night, invite all the art students and kids that want to kind of create at the high school, but also bring up the 8th graders as well, so they can kind of see what we do and maybe give them some ideas of where they want to go with that at the high school. So we are planning on doing that again, but we'll just dedicate it towards having a fun art night where people can create. An addition that we started, and I actually, and I'll kind of post these around. We have we started to use Instagram, right? So I think it's the biggest thing. I had spoken with Zoe, and a lot of what we do is we have Twitter and we have Facebook, but I think a lot of students either do Instagram or actually they're always telling me TikTok is even the bigger one. So what we did is that we created Instagram accounts, and I will leave these, I'll post them because they're very easy to just, to set it up. We have one for, and Kenny, who is at the middle school, he really kind of started this. So he started one at the middle school. He has it as the Polson palette. So we have the middle school, and then we did split it up. So we have one for the high school and one for the elementary school. And so this way, what we're going to be able to do, and I have to admit, the elementary school is probably the least developed so far, because that falls on me, and this is somewhat new to me, as far as doing all this, constantly doing the postings and things. So I'm working with Kenny, and we've decided, like, I'll do it every Friday, where I'll make sure it's almost like a dump of a lot of things onto Instagram, and people can see all this work. One of the, and I even looked at it with some of the things that we had done, I bring it up, what the students love is, if I bring up one of my students, it's like we put in one of these posters, and looking at it just the other day, they had 18 and the kids just, liked that photo. We shut off all the comments. There's nothing that anybody will be able to do or say. We are allowing, I think, some of the people that we follow back, because it's gonna be students, to make comments, because we'll use that in our classroom to kind of have them do it. But they respond so much to putting these photos on, and then all of a sudden they've gotten, I was looking wow, 7 or 8 more people just like that photo. So it's quick, but they really respond to that as well. So I think that is a nice addition to what we're gonna do. So I will post these around, and if people want them, we'll have them at all the schools and everything, so everybody will be able to get onto it. And I think as of yesterday, the high school we already had 100 people that were following it, which is huge. I mean, I didn't expect that, and we expect it just to continue to grow.
What is it? What is it?
I'm sorry, I will leave these here. These are the actual QR codes, so it does say it on it. So we have the high school one, we have Madison Art Kids is the elementary school, and then the Polson palette is the middle school. I did bring this because I thought it was interesting. So Kenny took our logo that we had gotten, right? And he had taken it and just added to it, right? This was the logo that they had used, and he kind of made it into the art logo, adding things to it.
Came up right.
Yeah, so it's great. I think it's a nice thing to be able to, well, first of all, I love the idea of using the same logo, but making it our own a little bit, so different departments could do a similar type thing as well.
Oh, yeah, all the pictures came out.
Yeah, it's pretty
so
cool.
it's great. And so we're just, like I said, we just want to really keep on adding it to it so people can see all this great work that
And
everyone's
then we
doing.
can just follow them
Yes.
and like them.
Yeah, and like them, and that's it. And so we already have some parents that have joined, so I'll get it onto our website, so that way people can get that even more. So that will be the end of this week, next week. Hopefully we get some of that stuff up, and we'll just see that kind of grow even more.
There's a bunch of exciting things in this moment for me. Like, one is that this is like all the way back around before COVID, right? So we've got the new library being built, and it's got those great rooms to showcase artwork. And Bill now has the ability to go in with really great frames, and the kids get to be professionals in that moment. And the community can appreciate the true artwork that was done. And I think prior, when the art shows were in the basement, I mean, they were in the basement. They really didn't feel professional, it felt like a basement.
And they were nice, and that's the thing that I missed out, is not
Yeah.
having the rest of the community being there.
But also bringing the art into the community through the social media piece is huge as well. And then the other piece, you mentioned Kenny is in his first year here in district, and he's making contributions already. So when we do have a chance to hire new teachers, it's really nice that somebody feels compelled to get so invested so quickly, so.
And to add to that, he's working also with Mary Merkel with the NL students, because they do some stuff in the community and they bring them in to do an art night over at Polson. So he's now gonna work with them, since Sarah is over at the high school full-time. And since he speaks Spanish fluently, it does help for those learners that speak Spanish, that helps Mary as well. So we're gonna continue that, and as an addition, we have Sarah, who was at the middle school, now is full-time at the high school, took over the Clay Club, which is, which they are now working with, I believe they're working with the Soup Kitchen, and they're doing, we had done it years ago, the bowls. Yeah, so they're doing that, and they are, so we have kids throwing, I mean, I'm throwing a lot of bowls too, and then letting them do all the decorating and trimming, but yeah, so we're gonna work with them and have our student work out
So that's the empty bowl night where you, they buy the bowls, right?
So this one, I
And
think the way
it's a
they're doing it is they're gonna
fundraiser.
spend a little bit more and they're gonna purchase the food, and then they can come up afterwards and select one of the bowls that the students had made.
That's-
So that way they get something finished.
I think, I mean, I appreciate your presentation. You know, I think we're faced with some real deep thinking about what we're asking the arts to do and what we want the arts to do in our district and on through the high school. And in terms of the value and the importance of creative expression, whether it be music or whether it be the visual arts or whatever, because you know, I mean, traditional, we looked at that and go, you know, we can train somebody traditionally in painting and they can learn all the craft of that, and there's a value in those skills. But somewhere in our head, we thought, you know, and they can go out into the world and be artists and, you know, be painters, and, you know, increasingly we're looking at that and going, any piece of artwork or any piece of music, you can now create in about 6 minutes with AI. You know, and we can look at it and go, you know, as they learn digital and whatever, and I keep looking at it and go, those are skill sets that are changing every 6 months. You know, the need for creative expression is part of our overall life and part of our overall education, from my perspective, is essential. And being able to hang on to that in the face of what's going on is gonna have to be very deliberate in terms of our thinking.
No, I agree. And I do have to say, and I didn't know if I would even bring it up, but we did have this piece of artwork, and I do believe that when they did it, they had somebody using AI in order to help create the artwork. And the only thing I still kind of look back at it and say the reason why the artists are the ones that should be doing it, not just AI, is that when you look at it, it looks great. Tigers don't have pointed ears. Tigers have rounded ears. So when we were looking at this, we we're going, what? And it's just because when you punch it in with AI, and AI can take this from so many different things. And I was thinking about it, maybe the ears were pointed to the outside and it looks like it's a point, but AI doesn't pick up on it, so they kind of create that. And it's the whole thing of when you look at AI and they can't do hands and they can't do a bunch of different things, it's those fine details. And I think that we can use AI for a quick little iteration, and we're taking this, and we had already, somebody went through and Claire fixed it and made the, you know, the ears rounded, and we'll just, I mean, I'd love to see it just kind of pushed in, and I'll give it to, you know, Chris Farrell and just kind of incorporate it and just kind of progress. But I do, yeah.
But in 6 months, it'll be able to do that, and so,
Oh, yeah, so.
you know, so the important thing isn't that, from my perspective, the important thing is, do you have, as an artist, have a concept of a tiger? Is there something inside your psyche, your thoughts, your, you know, that you want to be able to express and manifest? That is the artistic process, you know, and that's what we value. That's why we have it as part of the curriculum. So, you know, hanging on to that essential element, from my perspective, is gonna take a lot of reflection and work as we look at our curriculum. Sure.
Question.
Yep.
Are there any opportunities for expression in the area of performance art? And just for the peanut gallery, I'm not talking about the performing arts like music,
Right.
voice, acting. I'm talking about like fine art combined with the human element, like acting out art or something like that. Is there anything like that?
We don't have anything, I mean, right, I mean, they do have like a short film class, but that's not really what you're talking about. That's probably the most where they are looking at something and thinking about, I mean, you know, they look at directors and they think about it artistically and how are they gonna put that across. But that, I think that's the closest to what you're talking about. We don't have the performance art. I do think that some of what we're doing, like on Instagram, and I think this is where like the TikTok works better, is that kids like to have videos of everything that they're doing, so it can take them through a process. And I've gotten much more into doing clay, and funny because I've gotten going back into hand, you know, you're not gonna fake that, right, unless I buy a 3D printer to do it. But you know, I feel like that's the area that I, you know, I'm constantly just trying to change that. The students like to take images of everything they're doing, video of from the beginning to the end, putting it through into the glazes and coming out, so you can see a quick, almost the process as it goes through. That would be the only other thing that they do, so.
All right, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Very exciting updates. And my update is very short, but something that I periodically bring up to the committee. I think you heard a few times that we just went to the Boston for the NEAS conference and did a presentation on curriculum. So I asked for an analytic update because this conference was more international than I think I anticipated and I had seen before in other presentations that we did. So in a quick analytic of the past month, November 7th to December 7th, we have had just a bunch of queries. Definitely our website has seen traffic from Boston, New York, New Haven, Middletown, Hartford, Orange, and other local districts, but internationally, Brazil, China, India, Panama, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Dominican Republic, South Korea, and Canada. Last week, I had a teacher and I Zoomed in a conference with Panama. And this week, we're invited to Zoom with Dubai. So that's been really exciting about curriculum work. So we're looking at about 2,000 views overall. A lot of the interest is around the design of how we do curriculum, as well as different content areas, including mathematics is pretty popular. So that's very exciting work. So wanted to thank everybody for what they're doing.
How do you account for that? What is promoted this interest?
In the international interest is definitely a direct correlation to the conference and some of the attendees.
Okay.
So they went to our workshop and reached out afterwards. In state, I would say, and around, I mean, a lot of them are reaching out because of the conference too. NEAS changed its standard. One particular standard is around curriculum and curriculum development with profile of a graduate, which is a lot of districts haven't done yet. So we're getting a lot of calls from them. And I think there's somebody coming to hand next week too.
Okay.
Is it? I can't remember which district, but somebody just told me at the assembly that somebody else is coming in to do a little bit of walkthrough and see what programming is there. So the Dubai one is very interested in science pathways. That's something we highlighted, the before and after of science. Panama was more around profile of a graduate and general curriculum work.
That's great, so people came from all over.
All over.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
So
so we're getting good traffic.
It's a great opportunity, and they're, you know, it sounds like they're focusing on precisely what they should be focusing on, which is what is the process of the curriculum development that is going on here.
They're very much in awe that our board adopts curriculum. It's been very unusual. That's a statement, like, oh.
Well, I think the strength of local development of curriculum lends itself to shaping your curriculum after the profile of a graduate and after your district's mission and your board's mission. So from that perspective, it makes sense to have a board not oversee, but be involved in the curriculum adoption process.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a commitment over time, as you guys know, so, that and leadership stability is helpful in that end too, so some of the conversations have been really interesting, you know, about like how you get it going, and how you get teachers invested, what they're doing, but
It's all
we had a-
right stuff.
we had a
I
lot
mean,
of
in a world-
experiences.
In a world where you go out and buy it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't go out and buy profile of a graduate. You know, you have to do a lot of legwork to incorporate it. You know, I mean, I suppose you could theoretically buy something that says they
I
did
haven't
it.
seen it yet, that means.
Any updates on the reading,
No updates.
especially since we're Blue Ribbon School?
No.
Doesn't that like just say, people with green icing, doesn't it say that we should be able to write that?
Their concern is at K-3 level, or really pre-K to 3, but
We're
yes,
still in
I
the
mean,
district.
we're advancing our students beyond, well beyond that.
Obviously, it's work or what we've done up here, so maybe they should relook at that.
You notice how when we had a State Department of Education representative at the event this afternoon, I repeated in my address, I repeated the develop and deliver curriculum.
I did. Wow.
I would say that.
Yeah. Actually, my husband said that today. He said, well, now what do they say about that?
Right,
And I said, well, I don't know, I'm gonna ask tonight, see what they
Nothing
say.
much.
I know.
Very quiet.
Very quiet, yeah.
and you know what, quiet is good for now, so
Yeah.
let's take that.
No, that's great, that's exciting.
Thank you both so
Thank
much
you.
for your time
Thank
and all
you.
you do.
Thank you both.
It's very
Thank you.
exciting.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ed.
We can definitely find a time to connect and talk about what you were saying with some ideas for future work.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bill, do you want this back?
Oh, no, you
You
can,
can leave them in the room.
yeah, I would be
Sure,
here.
yeah.
I'm gonna print them up and put them all around,
Great,
so.
okay, all right, thanks.
I'll
Thank you.
I'll be back for
Bye.
those.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
So, do you have any questions or comments on the part of the committee or anybody else? Do you have anybody online, so?
Anything you wanna say?
All right, well, barring any other more comments, we will adjourn at 6:25.